much for joining a Sasko River Center parent discussion. This is our 8th this year. There's one more in May. So please check out our website if you have any interest in seeing that topic. My name is David Kucher, and I am co-presenting today with a colleague whose name is Janae Fitzpatrick. We will both, in just a few short moments, introduce ourselves and give you a little sense of our background. But first, let's start off with a couple of statistics. So in the fall of 2023, so that's last September, not upcoming September, but last September, 18 million US students enroll in college in the United States. 18 million US students. That is somewhere around 62% of all high school graduates enroll in a college as freshmen. Out of those 18 million students, 30% drop out in their freshman year. That's 5.4 million out of all of those 18 million wind up dropping out in their first freshman year. Next statistic. If you are the parent of a student who will be a freshman or a fresh person or fresh woman in September, I don't know why it's called freshman. That's got to have some patriarchal sense to it. If you are a parent of a freshman who will start in September, you have the first COVID class in front of you. So you've got students who were high schoolers during COVID, 9th graders during COVID, so lost some school time and went to school over Zoom for a long period of time. According to the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University, these students are about a third behind in their typical math curriculum and 25% behind in their reading curriculum. These students also have a huge increase in chronic absenteeism. So a typical absenteeism is somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. This group of students has a 28% absentee rate, chronic absenteeism. And by chronic absenteeism, it's defined as being absent about 10% of the school year, or 18 or so days. So you get a lot of this. Mom, Dad, I have dropped out of university. And obviously this is an even funnier cartoon because it's someone who's older, who's clearly been, living at home for a long while. So let's identify what it is that we're looking to do today, other than, scare everybody who has joined us and is already thinking, why did I choose to do this? That seems like a really, really bad idea. 5 or so years ago, look at on the left-hand side, you had a relatively clean table as you were thinking about going to college. You're considering all of the things you would expect to consider. If you absolutely know what it is that you want to study, you're looking for a school that offers some specialty in that. Maybe your biggest concern is location. You want to be close to home. You want to be somewhere warm. Maybe you want to be somewhere near an extracurricular that you are very much a part of, like rowing or skiing or what have you. Maybe your biggest piece on the table is finances, but it's a relatively clean table. That's what you have. Today, on the right-hand side, your table is a little bit more cluttered. It's cluttered with worry or anxiety. It's cluttered with preparedness. It's cluttered with more social media. It is cluttered with more organization and scheduling. It's cluttered with a lot of other considerations that maybe 5 years ago were not as much a part of that conversation. So let's identify the goal of the next 50 minutes. The goal of the next 50 minutes is not to create panic on this conversation, although I guess it sounds like it from those early statistics, for which I already apologize. But the goal of this is to really see if we can unclutter that right-hand side table and to spend a little bit of time talking about brain development and the academic skills that are in conjunction with the brain development, and really, really as the voices in the lives of our young adults, of our sophomores and juniors and seniors who are looking at colleges, or maybe even our freshmen who are having terrible years this year and are looking for a different college. As the adult voices in the lives of those students, what are some of the considerations? How do we take that table that is incredibly cluttered and really see if we can remove some of the items or prioritize some of the items so that we can help guide our young adults to making a decision that is going to make our students feel more empowered, more invited on the campus, more in control, and if nothing else, more aware of what it is that they still need some support on, and they still need some scaffolding on, without judgment, without a sense of shame, but being able to say, yeah, I'm not really good at fill in the blank, writing papers and organizing my schedule. So I guess I need somebody to help me with that because I'm going to college next year. Superb. Let's figure that out and let's move that forward. So here's what Janae and I have prepared for today as an agenda. Looking specifically at executive functions, how they develop, when they develop, and why executive functions are incredibly important to consider as you are applying to college. Coupling that with curiosity factor, and that comes in a couple of different flavors. One is curiosity about your own brain, curiosity as a junior or senior in high school, freshman or sophomore in college about, why am I not getting A's on these papers that I put tons of time into? Let me figure that out, and developing a sense of curiosity around how is it that I'm going to figure out how to get the support that I need so I can be a more independent learner. And then lastly, really talking a little bit more about belonging and community on a college campus so that we really are helping our young adults make the best choices possible for the brains that they have, and letting that help to guide a lot of what we are looking to do. So if I'm missing anything, or if you expected today to be something that was completely different than what's on here, please unmute yourself and be vocal about it. And we can hopefully pivot and address that, or say that that's just not part of today and then make that for another time. So feel free to unmute yourselves and add something if that is not what you expected for today. Okay, fantastic. So moving on. Just because I think that it's important that you know who you're speaking with right here, Janae and I are both going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll dive into some of the content of today. As I said earlier, my name is David Kucher. I call myself a learning coach. My background is special education. I worked for 6 years at New Canaan Country School as a learning specialist in their upper school, became the director of their learning resources program. I then pivoted to Greenwich Country Day School, and I was there for a couple of years at their middle school and then helped them to open their high school. So I've worked with the gamut of both learning challenges that are fairly typical in our community: ADHD, hyperactivity, inattention, slow cognitive processing, high functioning autism, slower cognitive pulse and tempo, things like that. And I also have worked with all of these schools as they try and meet the needs of their communities. And so I have a sense of most notably for this conversation, what students are looking at and what families are looking at as they go through the college application process, and how that has really changed over the last 5 or 10 years. And we'll speak a little bit more to that. For the last 2 years, I have exclusively been here at Sasko River Center, although I worked here since its inception, when it was Southfield Center. And I work one-on-one with students. I do a lot of consultation to schools and work with educators and work with special education departments as they try and meet the needs of the students that they have in front of them. So that's who I am. And as I started off by saying coach, because I really do feel like that's so much of the work that I do. As if you were going to become a better tennis player, the first thing that you would do is, play tennis in front of a coach, and then they would guide you on your backhand and your forehand and your stance and your what have you. And I feel like that is very in line with what I do with students. I work with students and I basically say, I'm going to watch you read now and take notes on it. And now we're going to figure out how to support and scaffold that. So that is me, my colleague, Janae.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, David, for the introduction to our time together today. And thank you to everybody for being here with us. My name is Janae Fitzpatrick. My background is school psychology, and that is exactly what I did in a private school leading up to the birth of my son. I then shifted gears, and this was just as executive function coaching was becoming a thing. The more I learned about it, the more I wanted more. And so I began doing coaching about 10 years ago. I then found myself in a leadership position in the alternative ed world, which was super cool. I got to observe and witness the power of a lot of project-based learning as well as self-directed learning. And then through COVID, I really took a moment to pause and acknowledged how so many of us are really struggling. And this anxiety has just pushed, literally all of us over the edge. And so how can we feel supported and how can we create community to feel that connection and to be able to tap into those skills that we need to live and survive? So they may be executive function skills, but also I see them very much as essential life skills, right? These are the skills that we need to complete and succeed through our day to day. And so I found SASCO about 1.5 years ago. I am thrilled to be here. I see clients of all ages, basically fourth grade and up through adults, working with children, but then parents as well. And I love this work. I see this as honestly trying to be part of the support system so that you, again, at any age, can bring your best self forward and feel successful in whatever way that means to you. So, again, thrilled to be part of this conversation. And we really do show up here today with hope. Again, not to scare or panic, but with hope, because these are the pieces we are going to break down exactly what we see as important to reflect upon in this process, therefore empowering all of you each step of the way. Okay, and then quick logistics. So clearly we're on Zoom, which has a lot of benefits. I wish we could all be in the same room together, but this is the easiest way to make sure enough people can join. So please feel free to keep your cameras off. You do not need to have them on. Please just make sure you are muted unless you want to pop in with a question. That being said, please feel free to also pop a question in the chat box. We will take a minute and pause every once in a while to check in, ask if you have any questions. And lastly, this is going to be recorded. And so if there is anything that you're missing or you care to share, you will be getting a copy of this video recording as well as the slides, right? Is that true, David?
It is true. I will send it out later today. So thank you. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to dive in. I spend a lot of time with college counselors and sometimes with college admissions committees or folks who are on college admissions committees. And what I often ask is, what are you looking for? What separates that candidate A from candidate B when on paper they often look the same? And while we spend a lot of time, and by we, I mean the parents and families I work with, the other special educators I work with, my colleagues here, we spend a lot of time talking about executive function skills. The college admissions committees spend a lot of time talking about executive function skills. And the reason for that is that they are looking for students who are going to be successful. So in the work that I do, I often break the sort of my worldview down into 3 different areas. And I get this is not a, David Kucher has come up with the 3 bullet points. This all comes from research that has been done year over year over year on prefrontal cortex development, executive function development. So I do look at executive function skills coupled with self-advocacy, the student's ability to say, hey, when I take a test, can I take it in a different room? Or the student's ability even to raise a hand and to say, I understand that math problem, but once you add a variable in front, I don't understand. And so being able to advocate for themselves, but also advocate in a way that is not global. I just don't get this at all type of thing. And then lastly, what the literature would term self-determination, that ability to go and be independent. I truly just come into this sense of autonomy. How do you go and do all of this by yourself and get to the point where you can advocate for yourself and you can go and support yourself on your own, even if that support comes from someone else, somewhere else. I'm not suggesting that you need to be able to show up in September of 2024 as a college freshman and not have support. I am suggesting that the idea for the next few months is that you figure out, what support do I need? And how do I put that in place? And how do I evaluate if it's being successfully used and implemented? So that's the piece that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about today. And the first place that I start is right here, talking about what is in fact executive function or executive dysfunction. So back to that idea of the sports metaphor. If we were looking at, you're going to go and you're going to play a new sport. You're going to go and play, I doubt anybody on here knows how to play like Gaelic hurling. If you're going to go and you're going to Ireland to play Gaelic hurling, the first thing that you need to do is you need to learn the rules. And then you need somebody who's going to help you practice. And then you need a team that is going to evaluate the practice that you're doing and kind of put you somewhere on a continuum so that you know where you are in your development of all of those different pieces. And that's exactly what schools are doing when it comes to executive function and executive dysfunction. Executive function challenges aren't really a problem of knowing what to do. Here's your homework tonight. You have a math worksheet. I want you to do every other problem, starting with number 1. You're going to do all of the odd problems and bring them back in tomorrow. Great. There's not a student who wouldn't understand that as a concept. But the problem is really knowing the how to do it, the process of going about doing something like that. So it could involve, how do I approach the problem? Or it could involve, where did I put my worksheet? How do I get my worksheet now that I'm home and I don't know where my worksheet is? So that's really when it comes down to it. And I spend some time thinking about executive function and the work that I do with colleagues beyond Janae. But Janae and I are the how. We're not necessarily the why. I'm surrounded here in my whole life, I'm surrounded by the why. I am surrounded by psychologists and psychotherapists and psychiatrists. Both of my parents are psychologists, and I am married to a psychologist. I'm surrounded by the why, but I'm not the why guy. I'm the how guy. And putting together that how is really the executive function piece, because executive functions are all of the skills that you need in order to make something happen or evaluate that process and the reasons why that process is not particularly happening. So I put a brain up here because I want everybody to get a sense of brain development. Brains develop from back to front. You're born with the cerebellum. The cerebellum is strong enough to let you breathe on your own, blink on your own, cry when you need something. If it didn't, if parents had to breathe for you, or if your guardians had to breathe for you until your cerebellum developed, the mortality rate would be awfully high. But it's not. Fantastic. Moving forward, you have 4 lobes to your brain. You've got a parietal, occipital, temporal, and prefrontal cortex lobe. In front of you right now, those yellow, blue, and green lobes are lobes that control things like vision, hearing, storage, so your short-term memory and your long-term memory, coordination. It also controls a bunch of involuntary pieces of what you have. It controls memory. All of those pieces are pretty much developed by the time you're 15 years old, in both boys and girls, young men and women. It's that prefrontal cortex that is not fully developed. So I use this every single time that I work with students and families in the early intake session so that everybody gets a strong sense of that. I am not an artist, but you get a sense that that is still a face. So you see your temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes there. Great. That prefrontal cortex, which truly is right here in the front of your skull, in the front of your brain, that prefrontal cortex continues to develop in females until they're about 24 years old, in males until they're about 27 or 28 years old. So while your child, your 15-year-old child, may have incredible short-term memory, incredible long-term memory, incredible ability to fill in the blank, pay attention. These executive functions may not be fully developed. And let's talk for a moment about executive functions. What are they? Executive functions are all of these items that I've listed below that middle column. So it is time management, forecasting, prioritizing, motivation, attention, process, planning, decision-making, task shifting, task initiation, you name it. All of these items that are in development, but are required for all of these academic skills. So even something as simple as, I'm looking at an academic skill of reading. Your assignment tonight is to read 2 paragraphs of The Great Gatsby and pick a sentence that you think is most representative of those 2 paragraphs of a theme in the book. In order to do that, you need A, the time management. I have set aside the time to do this. B, you need focus and attention for reading. C, you need task initiation. I am now going to sit down with my book, open my book. D, you need a plan. You have to have a pen in front of you so you can circle one of those sentences. Or maybe you have to review what the main themes are of The Great Gatsby in order to do that. Now you have to have enough working memory to be able to pull from your short and long-term memory to say, who are the characters? Gatsby, Nick Carraway, Daisy Buchanan, Tom Buchanan. So you remember what you're reading. So you can, wow, that is a lot of executive function that goes into what seems like this really easy, like read 2 paragraphs and write a couple of sentences, totally off the cuff assignment. When you look at some of these other more challenging assignments, and you've got a child, young adult, whose prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, you can imagine that you're seeing day over day, week over week, somebody who is really, really challenged to get some of these higher level, more challenged assignments done that are being given to them. So teachers and schools are incredibly aware of this. Starting all the way back in elementary school, teachers are giving students the opportunity to develop their executive functions. And when they're developing, so even think about when your child was in 1st grade or 2nd grade, they are being asked for sustained attention, but it's not get your Great Gatsby book and read a paragraph, a 2-paragraph, a chapter. It's, we're going to have reading circle. I'd like everybody to go to their cubby and get their book and come back over here for reading circle. And so it's 1 or 2 specific tasks. And there will be kids who can't do it. There will be kids who walk over to their cubby and they're like, what are we getting here? Why am I standing here? What am I doing? There will be kids who, between given the assignment, go to your cubby and get this, and standing up from their desk, halfway there, they're stopping to look at the fish tank, or they're stopping and they're grabbing some, and that all still falls under that development of executive function skills. So these are the primary executive function skills in elementary school that teachers are spending a lot of time on. Response inhibition, hold your question, please. Come and ask your question in a few moments. Emotional control, sustained attention, task initiation, some planning, some organization. Then, of course, we move on to middle school and high school. And so middle school and high school, the demands become far greater. The time management. we've got a paper that is going to be due on Friday. I'm going to give you some class time to work on that paper, and then I'd like a rough draft on Wednesday that you're going to peer edit, and on Thursday I'll give you some class time to turn that into a final polished paper. That's time management that I'm helping you scaffold to a certain extent. It's also goal-driven persistence. Working memory. Working memory comes into play when your job is to hear new information, retrieve previous information, store all of that in your prefrontal cortex while you do something with that information. So it could be an auditory lecture where I'm asking you to take notes, but interrupt me if you need to write something down. It could be you're starting to learn a foreign language, that where at first, your child finds great success because it is memorization, regurgitation, but now it's delivering in some kind of an oral way, a conjugation. So instead of just regurgitation, you now have to pull something out, do something with it in your working memory, and then still remember the rest of what has to happen in order for that oral recitation to take place. Flexibility, obviously, being able to move from A to B to C. And then the big one, and this is I'm not going to spend much time talking about it, but this for me, it really becomes the absolute critical executive function, which is metacognition. Your ability to step back and reflect on what worked, what didn't work, what do I need in order to predictably make this work again later. That's metacognition. The ability to say, teacher said this. I know that, if I'm taking a test next week in math, I'm not the one who can study the night before. I'm surrounded by people who seem to be able to do that, but that's not me. So I have to start studying the Sunday before. And I know that the night before the test, I need to meet with a tutor to go over these, whatever. That's metacognition and being able to do all of those items. And so one of the things that I really like is thinking about it in terms of a bell curve. So at the very top, you see this nice, big, long bell curve. That for me is elementary school. I rarely can go into a second grade classroom and tell you who's got executive function challenges, because the student who can take that direction, go to your cubby, get your book, and sit in your usual spot and do it like that, obviously falls under that bell curve. But the person who stands up at their desk and immediately gets distracted by the fish tank and needs to be told a second time, John, we're going to our cubby. Oh, right. Gets to the cubby. Wait, what am I getting here? Oh, your book. Oh, okay, yeah, my book's here. And then makes his way over. He still falls under that bell curve. He's still there. He's in development, but he's still there. Flash forward below. That bell curve is more like 8th grade. All right, everyone, take out your math homework from last night, pass it to the person to your right, and the person who's all the way by the door, pass that to the person on the other side of the room. We're going to have everybody grade each other's papers, and we're going to start with Karen. Karen, go up to the board. Can you do number 1? The kid who forgot his homework, can I run back to my locker? Oh, I don't think I have it anymore. Which did you say, left or right? Am I passing to my left or my right? Oh, that kid doesn't fall under that bell curve anymore. The bell curve is much thinner. And all the way to the right is an even thinner bell curve, a bell curve where you will find in college, you have one conversation about the items that are due for the course of the year. And so once you get there, you need that metacognition. You need to know what support you need. On top of all of that, you add stress. When you put stress inside of somebody's world, their executive functions begin to get hampered. And it genuinely happens because your limbic system, your emotional response system, releases a ton of cortisol into your brain, and you can't make decisions very well anymore. I often equate for adults, and I hope it's only adults on this conversation, but I often equate like, when was the last time you made a good decision, or you were able to really clearly have a great process when you were on your second martini? Doesn't happen. And so that's exactly what happens when you have incredibly high stress. So I look at the right-hand side of this. When you've got anxiety, or when you've got total burnout, or you've got stress overload, your brain fatigues and you are not able to produce. So if you're that kid who already doesn't have great working memory, and now you've been asked to stand up in your Spanish class and have a conversation exclusively in Spanish on material that you already don't really understand, you can imagine how poorly that's going to go. You have anxiety, you are asked to use a feature of your brain that is under development and underdeveloped. Your success level is not going to be high, and that is going to create great stress for you and challenge for you. And so obviously, as your stress goes up, your executive functions go down. So I wind up having some parents who come to me, or guardians who come to me and say, so how do we know? Like, my kid is doing all right. You know, my kid is getting B's in school and seems to get everything done. And what I do is I often say, so what kind of feedback are you getting, or do you give to your child? Like, do you notice that your child is often forgetful? And is your child, when exactly is your child forgetful? Is your child forgetful when it is a stress-driven thing, or is your child always forgetful? Is your child often impulsive, involved in things like, why did you make that choice? I don't know, I didn't even think it through. I didn't get a chance to. Things like that. Are teachers talking about your child in a way, or coaches talking about your child in a way that they're using terms like unmotivated or lazy? And then if you look at that, is your child really lazy, or does your child just not have a process? Or is your child unable to task initiate and doesn't know how to get started? Do you have the child who stares at a blinking cursor when she has to write a paper? So those are the kinds of things that I wind up looking at to say, is that an executive function challenge? Or is that just who you are and your personality? Do you still get everything done, but you need to look at a blinking cursor for a little while? And it's not as though like every child who is unmotivated to write a paper has this huge executive function challenge. I'm not in any way suggesting that. I am merely saying, like, if you're getting consistent feedback, or you notice consistent feedback where words are used, like, your kid is constantly shows up and doesn't have his homework with him. I wonder why that is. Because, you know, we work on Google Classroom, and it could be right there. Or your kid didn't follow the instructions, or if you're hearing those kinds of things over and over again, that could be an executive function challenge. So the whole point of today is to now step back and say, okay, that very cluttered table, what are we doing with that cluttered table as we approach college, and most specifically as we are prioritizing the questions that we might want to ask of ourselves and of the young adults in our lives? Because right now, if your kid is a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in any school in the area, independent day school, high school, you name it, public high school, you name it, they are very, very supported. First of all, their classes meet all the time. You know, they usually have a 7-day rotation with 1 drop or 2 drops of their classes. Everyone here in this area, they have some type of supported classroom. So either they've got a Google Classroom, or they've got Schoology. So you're able to go in and look at, here are the assignments, here are the missing assignments. Most schools are supported by some other type of back end for grade calculation, Aspen or Power School. So you're able to log in and even see, oh, look, you're missing this assignment. Or maybe the teacher didn't put the assignment in, but either way, you have an opportunity of somehow engaging in your work and in your material. The moment that you get to college, all of that changes. So you come in to college in August, and the first thing that you do is you get a whole bunch of syllabuses. And the syllabuses walk you through, this is what we are doing on September 15th. Your first paper is due on October 15th. Your second paper is due on November 15th. Your final paper is due on December 15th. After that, the teacher may never, ever speak about that again. So now your job is to manage that. And if you don't have the metacognition and the self-awareness, you are going to tank. It's a really, really challenging thing to go from looking at day over day, week over week, Google Classroom and PowerSchool or Schoology and Aspen to going to having a system that is digitized. There's no doubt that it's still a digitized system in college, but there's nothing that's giving you that countdown that says your paper's due in 2 weeks. And if you're in a big lecture hall, your teacher is probably not doing anything to remind you of that either. So your job is to be a little bit more self-aware in that process. And the truth is that college is that way by design. Because over the 4 years of college, you want that test. You want those executive functions to be challenged over and over and over again, so that when you show up at your first job, you're able to say, here's what I know I'm good at. Here's what I know I need support at. Not necessarily on the interview, but you're coming to the job and you're asking, how often are meetings taking place and what kind of team do I have, and. So all of that is about knowing your own brain. So I'm returning to this slide before, because this for me becomes the pivot. Your job. And by that, I really mean your job. I'm looking at, everyone who is on here, as well as me and my colleague, Janae. Your job is to really lead this young adult to self-awareness. Not self-awareness like, dude, you are terrible at prioritizing. Self-awareness like, dude, prioritization is not so great for you. What are we going to do? We have bombed a bunch of things this week because we didn't turn them in on time. What can we do to make this better next week? Now you're moving into scaffolding. How do we set you up so that you're going to find success with other people around you helping to scaffold, other people being your prefrontal cortex? And those other people can also be Apple. You can set it up so that your phone is sending you messages and reminding you of things. Fantastic, easy stuff like that. And then ending with a sense of independence. And so that becomes the other hugely important part, because that's what you want to bring to college. So for the moment, we've discussed those first few items, moving into curiosity, moving into belonging and community. Any questions before I turn this over to my colleague? Fantastic. Thank you very much, Janae.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, before I dive into this beautiful hierarchy of needs here, I just want to share a quick story about my first time at SASCO. So I pull up, and by this point, I had already spoken to David actually, and another one of our fabulous coaches, Margot. So I knew I had a sense that I was going to like the people I was going to be interacting with there. But I pull up to this cool office building. I walk in, and I'm immediately feeling safe. I'm feeling grounded. I'm like, it's visually appealing, right? Popping of colors, optimistic. Dr. Bogart comes out and introduces himself, and you can tell there's a nice warmth, connective, intuitive kind of energy coming from him. So again, I'm feeling good, and because I've lived my life of a lot of years, I know enough to ask myself, can I see myself here? Do I belong here? So we're going around on this tour, and I'm just amazed because let's be honest, it's a super cool place. The offices are nice, the people are friendly, the OT gyms are just really, really incredible, and kind of exciting to see. And so we're going through, and we round the corner and we get to the kitchen. And he's like, "Oh, this is where we keep our snacks and our beverages." And I'm like, "Oh my word. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They get it. This is where I want to be." Because Sasko knows that if you have a child who's hungry or thirsty, they are not going to be able to attend to anything. They're not going to be ready to learn. They're not going to be ready to engage. And so already I knew it. I had such a good sense. I could actually envision myself in that office space. I knew I wanted to be there, right? I felt the culture in the air. And so I'm sharing all of this because I think it's really important to identify the hierarchy that I'm about to introduce, but also asking your child, your student, um, Can you see your future self in that environment when you step onto that campus? Is it a culture that you feel and you want to be a part of? Empowering them and giving them that realization and awareness of asking these questions are extremely important. And so I'm going to now take a step back and talk about this hierarchy. And so originally, when I was preparing for this talk, I really wanted to hone in on belonging. And we're going to get there in a second. But I realized actually, for the sake of this conversation, the bottom two matter tremendously. So, this is a theory that was proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. The idea is that individuals must satisfy lower needs before they can attend to higher needs up on the hierarchy. So, at the bottom, you have physiological needs all the way to the peak, which is self actualization. This is the pinnacle. This is where, like, the real good stuff happens, the creativity. The inner potential is able to thrive. This is where we want to see our kids, right? But we need to be sure that these bottom layers are tended to before we can get into the good stuff. So, this also outlines the stages of human motivation and well-being. Again, as David said, these moments of stress, this huge transition that they're going to be going through, we want that motivation to be able to kick in when it's necessary, when they're totally feeling depleted and exhausted. We need their empowerment to kick in and their engagement to help carry them forward through those tougher moments. So, starting with physiological needs, these are your most basic needs, right? This is food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. So, although these do lend themselves to an entirely different type of executive function skills workshop around life skills, the importance of sleep, making sure you know how to grocery shop, making sure that you know how to do your laundry, all of those real life skills. um, we're going to table those, although extremely important, right? If your child does not have access to food, if they're not getting sleep, if they don't have clean clothes, they're not necessarily going to be able to even make it to class, let alone pay attention when they're there. We then have safety needs, right? So what does this mean? This is physical safety, emotional safety. What does it mean for your child to feel safest? Is this on campus? Is this off? Would they want to be near campus police? Do they want to know they have access to mental health um, wellness center at any given time or any given day? So identifying what's important for them to really be able to make sure they feel settled and held safely on campus. So then this shifts into the sense of belonging. So after physiological and safety needs are satisfied, social needs come into play, right? We are inherently social beings. This includes the need for friendships, intimacy, family, and a sense of connection with others. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So these three layers form the foundation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, suggesting that the higher levels, such as esteem and self actualization, can only be pursued once these needs are adequately met. So, again, confidence, achievement, like we want our children to be able to move up that pyramid as easily as possible, and especially during those times of stress. We need that solid foundation for them to feel connected and engaged, and again, to be able to dig deep in those tougher moments. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, belonging, this is about acceptance and support and engagement within the university community. So, when they walk on that campus again, can they envision themselves there? Um, it presents significantly and influences student well-being and academic outcomes, correlates with better learning outcomes, resilience, and student retention. It ultimately leads to an upward spiral of positive relationships, coping mechanisms, and engagement. And just to hit this home, I'm sorry if this is redundant, but I'm just going to give you some statistics to really emphasize the importance here. So, the National Center for Education Statistics reports a strong sense of belonging that correlates with higher academic success, as evidenced by higher GPAs among students who feel connected in their campus. It also has studies showing that students who feel a strong sense of community are up to 50% less likely to drop out. So now we're talking about those retention rates. The Journal of Higher Education emphasizes the heightened sense of belonging boosts graduation rates. They're more likely to complete their degrees within 6 years. And then, lastly, and if not the most important, mental health benefits are also noticeable. The American College Health Association identifies lower instances of depression and anxiety among students who feel part of a larger community. So, again, when your child walks on that campus, have them ask, like, do you feel you belong here? Simply put, this needs to be their community, right? This is going to be their home away from home. So, this is why you need their buy in and their engagement in this process. This is where the empowerment comes for both of you, or as the collective family unit, as you make these decisions about where they want to go and through this admissions process. So, with all of these in place, right, if you look at the pyramid of the hierarchy, this is us giving our children the best chance at bringing their best self forward. That way, their prefrontal cortex can remain intact, and all of those good higher level cognitive thinking skills and um, abilities are then tapped to find their own individual success. Next slide, please. So, connecting to their why. Okay, so where do you even begin? This process needs to be as personal as possible. Um, why do they want to go there, right? What is it that they are so excited about? Help them get as clear and specific as you possibly can. And so, how do you do this? By following their curiosity, but also, interestingly enough, using your own curiosity, right? So, why is this college exciting to you? What is it that you want to accomplish there? Why does this fit into your trajectory that you see for yourself? And of course, understanding their why fuels student motivation, making them more resilient in the face of challenges and obstacles. Connection to their purpose leads to heightened engagement in academic and extracurricular activities, enriching the overall experience. Pursuing a path aligned with their why encourages personal development and academic excellence, as students are more likely to seek out opportunities that resonate with their goals. And then, lastly, when students select their path, they take ownership of their decisions, leading to increased accountability for their success. So, I do just want to take a minute and pause here. I'm going to take a quick sip, because what I do want to acknowledge is where our children have been and where they're going. And why I bring that up is, remember, their whole lives, they have been told where to go, what to do, what to study, sometimes even how to study, right? Like, your homework is flashcards. That is great. But back to where David was going earlier, in the less support from the classroom teachers, professors sometimes have upwards of 300 students in a lecture hall. They don't get that personalized support. So this is this is the time to acknowledge that, look, I know you have not been given a lot of personal empowerment and or decision making through this process. We are now shifting into a whole new, well, phase, decade, right? We are asking you to make these really large decisions with our support. We want to be there every step of the way with you, but we definitely want you to take the driver's seat. And let me tell you, if they are not ready to engage, that is okay. This is very much a process. Again, today is to give language, awareness, all leading to empowerment and continuing the discussion within your family. Next slide, please. And so if you go home and you're all excited to talk about their why and what they're excited about going to college for, and this is what you get, like this la 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 la, that is okay. Again, this is a process. They literally are leaving an environment where they had to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. And now we're giving them this huge, responsibility in the coolest way possible, but it can feel like a lot. It can feel very overwhelming. And so, again, give it time, give it space. And if you feel you're not making the inroads that you really hope to, tap a different trusted adult. Even if it's just to get through that first layer of dialogue with your child about what they're really hoping their college experience looks like. This could be a family member, a mentor, a coach, um, someone that they know and trust and feel very comfortable with. It is okay to tap those supports around you. Next slide. And so choosing a right college, just to kind of reemphasize the key considerations of a good fit, because it involves aligning with how your child learns best, their interests, and the supports they need to thrive. Um, EF skills, academic and emotional supports while they are there. And then lastly, and this goes back into tapping into their why and their curiosity, I'd like to talk about high impact practices as well. And now, David, I know we do have a time. Okay. So, components of a good fit, these are things you and your child should consider. So, we have some obvious ones. We have location. Is it urban, suburban, rural that they're looking for? Size, not only of the overall school, but the class size as well. Cost, diversity, faculty to student ratio, how classes are run. Are they mostly large lectures, small discussion groups, etc.? Whether group work is integrated into a lot of classes, how students are assessed. Is it mostly papers or exams? Of course, the choice of majors. Now, that's a completely different conversation, but that does exist as part of this application process. The program structure. Does it include practical experiences along with academic programming? Term length. Does the student prefer longer terms where they study few subjects at a time, or short ones where they study one or two for a brief period? Again, how can we tap into their EF skills that they have and find strength in? What plays to their strengths? Their social environment, is it centered on fraternities and sororities? Is that what they want, or are there other clubs that may interest them? Housing choices, are there quiet dorms or single gender dorms? Of course, high impact practices, HIPs that I briefly mentioned. Um, are there living and learning communities? And is there a career services office? What do they offer there? Next slide. So, a large study of college students in the general population found that only 20% thought they had been very well prepared for college, 50 somewhat, 19 poorly, and 9 very poorly. Okay, so those are some rough stats. And then just to add on, a recent study that surveyed students who were registered with the Disability Services Office found that only half students said they were prepared or very prepared for college. If you're going to take away one thing from this talk, it is that students report the three things that were beneficial to have extra instruction in creating that solid foundation of success for them was time management, note taking, and writing had been the most beneficial. Different kinds of support. So again, no college is the same. The recipe and formula for each of these on every single campus. So even freshman seminar, that is something that could be a short 2-hour block that's part of your orientation, to a 3-day short seminar, to even a full semester. Some schools require it, some do not. A lot of the general accommodations include, or general supports rather, tutoring center, writing lab, counseling and mental health center, and then the disability services office. So this is important because if your child has received any type of academic support through an IEP or a 504 plan, they no longer count once you get to school. And no one is going to be following up with you or your child to make sure accommodations that are necessary for their success that they deserve are going to happen. Like, you have to apply. This is very much a proactive system, and it is their responsibility. Again, you're going to go through the Disability Services Office. Through them, you can identify what type of services they typically provide. And from there, there are different levels of support on different college campuses. But what I would suggest is don't just take at face value what the website says. Get someone on the phone, talk about what this looks like, talk about what they offer, get a clear sense of what they need to have your children apply for these accommodations, and then support that process all along because it is their responsibility. Next slide. Okay, so just quickly, HIPs are awesome. We have, oh my goodness, 70% of students who participate in HIPs feel more engaged and connected with their learning experience. So these are active learning practices that have been widely tested, such as first-year seminars, as we just discussed, learning communities, writing intensive courses, collaborative projects, undergraduate research, diversity, global learning, internships, and capstone projects. These allow for the true personalization of their education journey to come to fruition. And so again, like inquire what these are on the campus that your child is really hoping for. Get a sense of what your child is going to embrace, right? Is an internship something that they will love? Are they a hands-on learner? Are these going to play to their strengths? So do research. They can be quite powerful and really, really positive.
Now to the
Ooh.
end of our conversation, with a sense of, so now what? It is like the last paragraph in a 5-paragraph essay that a student has been assigned. The idea is not to create fear and panic. The idea is to have our eyes wide open for our young adults whose eyes may not be perfectly wide open and perfectly aligned. So really looking at or thinking about that cluttered table as a metaphor. What can we do on that cluttered table to help guide our students? Is it taking some time to help your child have a better sense of self-awareness? Is it working with the school to ask teachers, what is my child typically good at or not good at? Is it really stepping away and saying, my child gets A's in math and foreign language. What are the skills that go into that don't go into the classes where my child's getting B's, like English or history? And approaching all of them without any real sense of judgment, but saying, okay, so now that we have a sense of the skills that you are naturally good at and the skills that you need some scaffolding on, let's let that help guide the conversation of what college we're going to pick for next year. And it doesn't have to be the only thing that guides it, but it is a new piece of information, perhaps a new question that has slightly higher priority. And if you're struggling to have that conversation, get another adult in your life to help ask those questions. Like I said, I work with a lot of college counselors, and the questions used to be, what do we have to do to change your GPA to get you into Columbia, which is where you want to go? Conversations don't run that way anymore. The conversations are so much more about what skills does your child have? And how do we align those skills with what your child might need? Your child really needs a school that has freshman seminar for 2 semesters. That's going to help keep your child on point. Great. Let's pick a school that has that. Many, many, many schools have that now. So that is really the goal. We have a couple of resources. There are also many resources that have been embedded inside of this Google Sheets, and you will get a copy of that in short order. So you'll have that by end of day today or tomorrow. And right now, without very much time left, I say thank you to you and say thank you to my co-presenter, Janae. I've got a couple of moments for question. There is one question in there. Not a question, a comment, informative and helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any quick question? As questions do arise, or as something that is much more specific arises, you're working with your child to figure this out, feel free to reach out to either myself or Janae, or reach out to Sasko River in total. Those 3 emails that are there will help guide you to what it is you might be looking for. We're happy to answer questions. We're happy to put you in touch with any resources that we have. And I think that's all we've got to say. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and energy joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, have a great day. Thank you.